At this point, you should hopefully have a whole bunch of material put together, lists and maybe maps or whatever it is you do to put together lots and lots of material. Now the question is, you've got all these materials, you've got a concept, but you don't yet have a story. So another step we're going to take to help us get to that story is to think about the story of an object, or learning how to pull a story out of an object, how to pull a story out of a person. So first thing we're going to do, we're just going to do an example. We're going to run through a series of questions. The series of questions have to do with when did this object come into my life? When it came into my life, why did it come into my life? Or why did I encounter it? When did I encounter it? How has that object's role changed over time? Or how has the meaning of it changed over time? And if it's changed, that means it was one meaning and then it was another meaning, or it had one role and then it had another role, and somewhere in there it made the switch. So there's a moment in there. What was that moment when its role or its meaning changed? Where did those changes come from? They were that change was a response to something. Something caused that change. So and how? Well, let's see. And what has the significance of that change been? Right? Okay, so it went from being not very meaningful to meaningful, but why is that even important? What impact has that had on your life? And not just getting you thinking differently, but how has it had you acting differently? So what we want to do is we want to take this concept and think about the history of one of the objects you associate with this concept. So I'm gonna give you an example. For instance, there's a really important person in my life, and that's my dissertation director, Deborah Journet. And so I'm going to run through this list very quickly just to start generating some ideas about Deborah. Because maybe I want to do a story about Deborah, or maybe I'm doing a story about my dissertation, and I need to start thinking about Deborah. Okay, let's roll back a little bit. Let's say I wanted to write a story about my dissertation. And as I was going through this brainstorming process, one of the items that came up on my list was Deborah. And I thought, well, of course, Deborah is central to the work I'm doing. So I put everything aside. I took Deborah and put her on the top of my list and said, okay, now I'm going to run through this brainstorming about Deborah. And I did all this information, and I feel like I've really got lots to think about in terms of her. And now I'm going to go through this part. And this part is these questions. So first question, when did Deborah come into my life? Well, Deborah came into my life when about 5 years ago, when I first enrolled at U of L just to see if I wanted to be in the PhD program at all. I took one class. She was the instructor. She was really nice, really smart. She didn't exactly take me under her wing, but she definitely gave me specific attention. She did close readings of my work, just like she did with all of her students. But it made me feel like I was going to be able to interact with the teachers in this program really well. So it was very encouraging. Why did she come into my life? Well, she came in because I was interested in getting more schooling. I wanted to be a better teacher. I wanted all these things that required a PhD in rhetoric and composition. So I enrolled. When I enrolled, I encountered Deborah. How has her role changed over time? Well, not only was she sort of the first instructor that I encountered, but she's also easily been the most important. She became my dissertation director, but I think the major shift in the role for Deborah was when she asked me to help out putting together a collection of digital scholarship, which is a really, really great project, but I'm just a graduate student, and she asked me to work with her and another professor putting this together, and it's been a huge blessing, and it's been great for my career, but it's only, but the most important thing in terms of me and Deborah is that in this way, Deborah looks to me as an equal, as someone she can learn from, someone whose advice she seeks out for certain questions, and I do the same for her within this project, and it sort of transitioned us from teacher-student to colleague and colleague, which is really, really a nice transition to have happen when you're in graduate school. So I could tell the story of the day that she invited me over to her house for coffee. We were talking about this and that, and she said, hey, look, I want to ask you an important question. Here it is. Here's who you're going to be working with, and I want to know if you're up for it. I would love to work with you. It was hugely important to me. And since then, her role in my life has changed. It's made me feel, it's given me more self-confidence as a scholar in all sorts of ways. That's how I would work through that set of questions if I were writing a story about Deborah. Or at least that would get me started thinking about her, and maybe something in there, like maybe I could talk about that moment that she asked me to be part of this. Or maybe it was the first moment that I realized that she was actually going to rely on me as someone whose advice she would really genuinely consider. It was really, really amazing to experience that as a graduate student. But this is just how you would do that about a person. You could do it about an object or a pet, for instance. I could go through these lists of questions again with my dog. My dog's name is Rilke. When did he come into my life? He came into my life about almost 4 years ago. And I picked him up from the shelter. Why did he come into my life? I always thought I've always wanted a dog. I liked the idea of them. They seemed fun. And it was great. But how has his role changed over time? Actually, in a kind of an interesting way. I got him because I thought it would be fun. I've always wanted a dog. They fascinated me. But what I've since realized is that I got to take care of this dog. And it's a lot of work. I got to feed him every morning. I got to feed him every night. I got to take him on walks. I mean, you know the drill, right? So that's a lot of work. And I knew that, and I was ready to sort of do that because that's what I'm supposed to do. What I found out is that I really love doing that. I like having something to take care of. It's a sense of responsibility. It's something in my life that is not about me. It's more important than me. It's something else, something that takes away from my own sort of me being at the center of my own life, at least momentarily. So it's great in that way. When did I realize this change? I think the first time I tried to travel out of town and I forgot to make plans. I was leaving for a couple of weeks and I forgot to make plans for Rilke, and then I had to scramble and realize, man, I am completely in charge of this guy's life. And I need to make sure I consider that more. But it wasn't a burden. It was actually kind of nice. And that was when I was packing to leave town for a couple of weeks one summer. So where do these changes come from? I guess I don't know. I think part of it has to do with this transition happened during a stretch of time when I wasn't in a relationship for a while, and maybe I needed something to focus my affections on, and I really started to dig my dog, and he became something incredibly important and central, as opposed to a relationship doing that in my life. Maybe that. I don't know. I'm brainstorming. So why did his role in my life change? Well, partially because, part of it feels like I just couldn't help it. He's an amazing dog. He's great. Part of it is because I needed something to love. So there's those things. And what has been the significance of that change? It's taught me something, I think, about how rewarding it can be to focus on something other than me. Not that that was ever a foreign concept. This was just maybe one example of when that thing doesn't necessarily have to be another singular person. It can be a pet. It can be an organization. It can be a movement that is more important than me in some contexts. So in that regard, I think I've learned that from Rilke, my dog. So that should cover sort of the way you can, just some of the questions you can run through to say, what's the beginning of this object? What's the end of this object? How has its role changed? And you can do this for any of the items in your list, and might help you get started thinking about how to introduce the idea of time into all of these concepts that you've got working in your story.